you know who you're giving all of this money to, if you can trust them, what the terms are. Hello and welcome back to a Sideways Life podcast, the honest guide to living and working abroad. This is episode 71. Ooh. I'm Leanne.
I'm Al.
And welcome.
Hello. So if you've been listening recently, then you'll know that we've put together a roadmap, which is going to help you to live and work abroad. And it basically consists of 3 main questions, and each question has 3 sub-questions. So do you remember? Here's a test for you, Leanne. Do you remember the 3 stages?
The first is why, the second is how, and the third is where.
Exactly. So question number 1 you have to ask yourself is, why do you want to live and work abroad? Then you go on to, how am I going to live and work abroad? And finally, you go to the, where am I going to live and work abroad? And we discovered that most people, including ourselves, start off with the where, and then they go, oh, we work out the how, and then after a while they work out, oh, maybe actually, the why was about things didn't change the way we thought they were going to change. So we asked that we do it in the reverse order.
Yes.
So today, what are we talking about today, Leanne?
Well, last week, if you listened last week, you would know we kind of talked about we talked through the whole roadmap, but really we were kind of focusing on the why, because we have just left our home in Istria. We are now in Split. So we talked about kind of why we made that decision to leave Istria and try out a new city. So today, as we are in said city and we've had a hell of a week, not going to lie, it's been some highs and some lows, and we'll tell you all about them. But yes, we thought this week, let's talk about Split as our where. Things that we found out since we've been on the ground, mistakes that we've made that we could have potentially avoided. We're a bit out of practice, aren't we? We used to do this a lot more frequently, so we're a little out of practice. So we've just been reminding ourselves a bit more about how we used to approach it, the things that we used to do that we've perhaps forgotten about, or I guess just the level of vigilance that we had that we perhaps forgotten kind of how vigilant we were. So we're going to talk you through kind of our where, what we figured out, and hopefully some tips as well, not just about Split, but wherever you're looking in the world, these tips should transfer, I think.
Absolutely. So let's call this something like the X number of mistakes, or the X mistakes people make when deciding where to live or actually moving to where they live. Is that too negative?
No, I think just pitfalls, risks, mistakes that we've made.
Okay, so mistake number 1. Do you want us to kick off for that, or will I?
Should we kick off at the deep end?
Yeah, go ahead.
What are we kicking off with?
I don't know. You look very confident when you said that.
So I think the first thing to think about, particularly if you're going to a city, if you're going to a small town or village, then this variable is going to be much less risky. But if you are going to a big city, choosing the right area is really, really important in terms of what the lifestyle is like, what the general kind of community is, whether it's young people, whether it's families, whether it's older people, how close you are to the city centre, whether you want to be close to a specific landmark or the sea, kind of figuring out how to decide on the area, and then also what is affordable, because different areas come with different price tags. So we moved to Split. We'd previously stayed in the old town. We loved the old town, but it wasn't right for us because we've got dogs, so it's nice to have a bit more open space nearby. We have a car with all of our stuff in it, so we need somewhere reliable to park it. In the old town, parking is a problem. So we knew we wanted to look out. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of space as well, we wanted to have a little bit more space in terms of our actual apartment that we lived in. So from affordability perspective, the further out we moved from the city centre, generally the more affordable it became. So that's what we decided to do.
Now, just to give you a bit of context on this, then, our advice on this is going to be not to book a long-term Airbnb, tenancy, whatever, without getting boots on the ground.
Yes, so we're only here for 5 weeks. So initially we kind of thought, and if you travel a lot, you'll know that once you hit a month on apps like Airbnb or booking.com or anywhere really, once you hit a month, you're going to start to incur some really chunky discounts. So for us, we're only here for 5 weeks. Let's just book one place. We can explore from there and go about it. Even now, that is a mistake. We thought it would be fine. So if you are moving somewhere long term, then absolutely get your boots on the ground before you sign any kind of long term lease. To give you an idea of the area we're in, we were really kind of swayed, first of all, by the apartment that we found. It is a beautiful apartment. It's small, it's petite, it's only a 1 bed, but it's really nicely furbished. It's on the top floor of a newly built apartment block. It's got a wraparound terrace, looks over it depends which way you look. If you look one way, you see the beautiful mountains that border Split. If you look the other way, you're looking at a road and some dodgy looking houses. But you choose to look in a particular direction, it's fine. The mistake we made is that we're a little bit too far out, in that to get into town, we're about a 45-minute walk, which is fine. We've done it. To get to the beach, it's about a 45-minute walk. Fine. We've done it. But more the issue is, the area that we've picked, because we didn't take the level of vigilance and research that we usually do, we were kind of like, there's certain areas that we liked within fair distance. So how different can it be? Well, quite different. And unfortunately, the neighbourhood that we picked, we have since learned being on the ground is not the most desirable place to live. These things can happen anywhere, but it did happen where we currently are. Peanut and I got in a bit of a pickle with an Akita, which is a large dog, on Tuesday, which resulted in a visit to the vets and patching ourselves up, and I have got the most bruised legs. Saying to Al the other morning, at this point I think I'm just easier painting myself purple than hoping for any kind of tan or getting my legs out this summer. So yeah, not a great experience. Since talking to the vets, we've realized that these things aren't necessarily common but not unheard of in this area. So for us, that has really reminded us that we're tied into 5 weeks. Split is very expensive. Season started. We are here now. So we're gonna have to get through it, and we've got workarounds and whatnot. But it has reminded us that if you are new to a city, ask. And I think before you get there, get onto the Facebook groups, which again we used to do and we didn't. Why didn't we do this?
I don't know. We're excited, I think.
Yeah. So get onto the Facebook groups, find things like for Split, to use an example, there's an expats in Split group, there's a digital nomads in Split group. Get on there, ask the question, where are the best neighbourhoods in the city to live for your specific circumstances, whether that having animals, being a couple, being a family.
And where to avoid.
Yeah. I think that's the first tip before you book anything and before you're able to get on the ground. Ask.
Absolutely. And the second tip is it is a bit more expensive doing it this way, but is to book somewhere for a week maybe. And then once you're there, just decide.
Yes.
Yes, you're going to miss out on the monthly discount, but the fact is that we're now going to leave potentially a week to 2 weeks earlier than we expected to.
A week earlier, yeah.
To go and live in the area we want to live in. So really, the discount we've got is smaller than the money we're going to be wasting by leaving earlier. Yeah. And the other thing about Airbnb you may or may not know is that if you do book a month or 28 days or longer, there's no cancellation policy on it. Even if you cancel it a week before, then generally you don't get any money back. So there's advantages. You're going to get a big discount for 28 days or longer. Disadvantage is that generally there's no cancellation policy. So if we were to do this again, I think that we would probably book for 7 to 10 days here.
Yeah. In
this apartment. We'd probably discover fairly, hopefully not the way Leanne discovered with Boa. She was fighting off a 50-kilogram dog. And by the way,
the way.
Yeah, she won. she pulled the dog off our little dog, who's 15 kilos, and so she pulled it off by the scruff of its neck, and poor Peanut. Yes, he had some bite marks and punctures, and he's been to the vets. He's very sorry for himself. But the fact is that Leanne stopped it from being much worse than it could have been. Anyway, so the point is that if we'd been here for a week, even without that happening, we would have heard people say, just the one area you need to avoid is X, and that's the area we were in.
We learned that pretty quickly, didn't we? We actually, and this is another good way to do it if you are self-employed or freelance, or you need kind of that kind of working element to it. We visited a co-working space, which is about a 20-minute walk from where we're currently living. And and just went to see it. I think they came up on LinkedIn. I thought, that's weird. It's quite close. Let's go see them. Lovely, lovely women that run it. Had a great chat with them. The co-working space wasn't quite right for us at this time, but we had a great conversation anyway. And the minute, we asked them about areas, what parts of Split do you really like? So this was on Tuesday. We arrived on Sunday. And in 2 days, they told us, everywhere is great, avoid this. What did they say? It's like the Wild West. Like, just avoid this area. And we're like, shit, that's where we live. Fuck.
So there's the first tip, is that if you are going to a different city or a different area, then just book for a week or 10 days. Yes, it's a more expensive way of doing it, but overall it'll be better, because you can always negotiate directly with the Airbnb host at that point if you love it, assuming there's availability. So tip number 1 is just to book a small amount of time.
And try and ask on the groups as well before you.
Okay, well, tip number 2 is to ask on the groups. And tip number 3 is, when you do get there, ask everyone, like, where is the best area to live? We've spoke to I
think people as well that are actually going to that are similar to you. So we asked the women in the co-working space because they're connected to the nomad community. We talked to people we met on the beach, on the dog beach, because they have pets and well, they have dogs. And then we asked people just in restaurants and cafes and bars that we go to. But I think as well, it's asking a good representation of people, because people are going to say shit about an area for some reason. We know people who would talk badly about certain areas in Manchester where we've actually really liked. So you have to kind of gather various opinions, I think. And I think our typical rule is, if we hear the same thing about one place 3 times, we tend to trust it.
Yeah. So whether that's positive or negative from 3 different sources. So there's your sort of top tips. First top tip is to book for a small period of time. Second top tip is to ask on Facebook. In fact, probably that should be your first. Ask on Facebook groups. Ask around what the areas you should look at, what the areas you should avoid. And thirdly, when you do get there, treat your first 10 days as just talking to everyone. You want to find out where you want to be after that. And so, just like Leanne said, ask everyone, but do take A, with a pinch of salt, and B, just think about the person you're asking. If you're asking an older person who's in their 60s and you're 19, where the best place to live is, they are definitely going to say
slightly different opinion.
Yeah, they're probably going to have different opinions.
Yeah, but then similarly, if you're asking a single person, you have a family, you have children, then you're going to get a different viewpoint. So yeah, I think the other thing that we have learned and seem to have had confirmed since we've been in Split, and we would have said this on the podcast ages ago, I'm sure, but when we're in Spain, there's a general rule of thumb that we learn about calculating local rents that local people pay, because there is a tourist tax, and they're going to try and get more money if they can. And I say they as in people all over the world. But typical rule of thumb is, whatever you are paying as a tourist per week, particularly in season, so kind of April through to the end of September, whatever you pay per week is typically approximately going to be what that monthly rent is on a long-term let. Does that make sense?
It does.
So if you're paying £500 a week, it's likely that the rent,
Airbnb.
then it's likely that the rent per month is going to be £500.
Yeah, and that's a really good rough rule of thumb. There is some slight changes in August in very, very touristy areas. For example, apartments over here can go for €3,000 a week in August. So just ignore the August one. But generally, the shoulder months are May, June, July, September. That's what it's going to work out. So there's your tip number 4, is that your weekly on Airbnb is roughly your monthly on a longer term. Tip number 5 is that, particularly in Croatia, I don't know whether it happens in the cities in Spain or France or anywhere like that, but particularly in Croatia, we've noticed that people will offer, say, oh yes, there's a long-term rental here, but you have to disappear for July and August. You can't stay here for July and August. Or it's, let's say, €800 a month, and then July and August, it's €3,000 for those 2 months, then goes back down to 800. So
that seems to be more the case in Croatia, doesn't it?
Yeah, we've not seen it anywhere else.
And we never had it in Spain. We were there for 4.5 years and never had that. But yeah, particularly in Croatia, it does seem to be a thing. And it may well be, like, say, Croatia is the main economy is their tourism, so it is everything. So there may be similar places, but yeah, worth checking on that.
Absolutely. And I think the tip number 5 is that you it kind of contravenes what we thought at first, but it's unlikely you're going to find the place you're going to live, or a good place to live economically, by going through websites and going through remote. It's being boots on the ground. And we talk about this. When we first went to Spain, so we lived in Spain for like 4.5 years. And we looked online and everything was saying, it's around about sort of €1,200 a month for €1,400 a month.
And this was back in 2013.
Yeah.
So it was like, what?
Yeah, that was quite expensive. Then we took a flight in, I think, the beginning of May. I can't remember. It was early.
Yeah,
early
I
in the
think maybe
year.
even March, April time. Yeah.
We took a flight over for a week and just met with lots of different agents and got them to show us around, and then went into and that was good, because the first part of it was they showed us, the first agent took us up and down where we wanted to live and showed us each sort of like development or village or whatever or town, and then once we'd narrowed it down, going we kind of like this town, then we started going around the local agents, and what's interesting is that we went to a couple of English guys in this particular town. And they were, I can't use that word on this podcast, but they were arseholes. Actually, one of them was all right, but the other guy was a total dick.
Yeah.
To the point where we said something like, he wanted €900 for this apartment. And he said, we want 2 months deposit. And I was like, that's
2 months deposit, 3 months up front. And it was like, what? Handing you over like 5 months.
Yeah, and we said, that just doesn't sound, that's not ideal for us. And he said, well, I have to question, if you can't afford that 5 months, then do I want to rent to you? And it's like, fuck off.
Yeah.
So then we went to another little Spanish letting agent, and she spoke amazing English and Nieves, and we started talking to her, and she went, right, I've got 3 or 4. Let me show you some of these tomorrow. We ended up renting our first apartment for about €400. It was
a better apartment.
Yes.
In the same block.
Yes.
For €500.
Was it 500
a month?
Which when the euro was
1 month's deposit.
Yeah, when the euro was 1.4. Sorry, I'm talking over you a little bit today, aren't I?
No.
When euro was 1.4, so it was more like about 375 quid or something a month for this 2-bedroom beautiful apartment with a pool and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that happened to us when the first place we went to. The second place we went to, which is maybe about 2 or 3 years later, because she actually got us 2 houses there. She got us the apartment and then another one. I remember we call it Dream House 1, because there's been 3 dream houses. Dream House 1, we went into this apartment and she said, let me just open the blinds to the terrace. She opened like the shutters to the terrace, and then you could just, there was nothing in front of us but until it got to the Mediterranean Sea, about 10 meters past it. And there's I say private beach. It wasn't really private beach, but it was difficult to get to if you were coming from the public.
Yeah, it was only really people that lived around there that would use it.
And as she opened the shutters, we both looked at each other and went, yeah, this is the one. This is the one. Now, that happened again. We went to Colmenar, didn't it?
Yeah, which is a village in Andalusia, a little north of Malaga.
And so we went up there and we literally drove to the top 6 villages according to population in this particular area, which is called Axarquía. And we went to each one of those, and we were like, okay, so this is like the 3rd most popular village, or 3rd most populous village by number of people. And we really liked the feel of the village. There was 2 or 3 little sort of little restaurants. There was quite a few bars. It just felt really nice. And so we landed. We had a cup of coffee. We looked around and we saw a Guinness sign hanging out for one of the bars. So we went along and we looked in the window, and yes, it was owned by an English person. Actually, it was owned by an English lady, but her husband, I think, was either Irish or Irish roots. I can't remember exactly which.
Yeah, I think he was Irish, and they'd rented out the unit to a couple of guys from Granada.
And so we looked in the window and said, yes, there's a estate agent. She's an estate agent. So, I mean, it was luck, but we wouldn't never have found her because her website is difficult to find and difficult to navigate. And I don't even know whether the prices are the same on the website as they are.
I doubt it.
So we rang the number, got in touch with her, went had a coffee with her. She's like, yeah, I've got 5 places I can show you. And we got our next place, which was
Well, she initially just met us for a coffee and asked us lots of questions about us and what we do, how long we're around, how we work, how we make our money, where we've lived previously, whether we'd gone through agents or local people. She really was just like she wanted to find out more about us, see if she could trust us, really, didn't she? And then she was like, yeah, I'll go and have a think, and I've got some places, I'll send you some details. And I think we actually met her then a second time, and she took us out. So I think, and that happened in Croatia as well. There seems to be some kind of culture. Let's just meet first, see if we can trust each other, and then we'll talk.
Mm-hmm. But all this is because we were on the ground. And she found us two properties, one on a short-term basis, which had got an indoor swimming pool, It got a pool table. It was great. And then whilst we were there, we had the time then to say, right, okay, come April, we're looking for something for 12 months. And she took us to several different places, spent a good day with us, and we found our dream villa, which was a villa in the middle of some olive groves, looking out over the most beautiful scenery, huge terrace, pool, 3-bedroom summer house, which I think we got for €800, was it?
Yeah. Good time.
It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. So we never, I mean, that kind of thing would, Airbnb would easily be 800 a week. And, if you tried to do it remotely, then, they'd be like, oh, well, this is going to be €2,000 a month because you're not there. They don't trust you. They're going to, charge you more.
And we found that in Croatia as well. So when we were looking at apartments for this trip, we actually saw one that was ridiculously out of our price tag, and we've since learned ridiculously overpriced. But we were like, with cheeky offer. And that's the other thing as well on Airbnb, is to be a bit cheeky and give people and we've definitely talked this before in terms of Airbnb tips, but people will sometimes be open to negotiating. On this occasion he wasn't, but I kind of said to him, just out of curiosity, what this went for long term. He gave a daft number.
Do you want to tell them the number?
Oh, yeah, he gave us €4,000 a month.
€50,000 he wanted for the year.
For a small 2-bed apartment in a great area. Don't get me wrong, it's a great area, but beyond that, it does look like a bachelor's thrown up in it. It's not. No. But then just even sparking that kind of thought that we might be looking for long-term options, he then got in touch with us a couple of weeks later and was like, look, if you guys are in Split, do you want to come and see it? Maybe if you see it, it'll change your mind, blah, blah, blah. It didn't. But what was really useful is that we met not the owner, but the guy who is basically managing the property for him, who was lovely, very well connected, has a couple of houses down in Markaska, which is a bit further down the coast. And he, because we chatted to him, we had a really good, just nice people, weren't they? We had Peanut with us, so that kind of sparked some conversation about their dogs, and they loved animals. And I think we just, again, you start to build that personal relationship. And then he called me, didn't he, a few days later, and was like, your man's dreaming. I think 35 is more reasonable. At that point, we don't even like the flat. You could offer us for £2 and we wouldn't take it. But I kind of said that, now. But, we might be back. We'll be looking long term. Is this something that you help people do? Not sure what you do. Do you take private clients? He was like, yes, we do. And then just so you know, you should get somewhere really decent, looks decent, for between €1,000 and €1,500 per month. And we only would ever have found that out from kind of taking the time, having the conversations and building that relationship.
Absolutely. So that goes into, so that's tip number whatever it is. I might have to listen back to this and do the show notes. But so that is, get your boots on the ground. You've got to get there. Don't ever sign up for anything you've not seen for a long term. And I would even say that a month is long term if you're in a really nasty area. Or worse. Now, this is my final tip, and you might have more, I think, but my final tip is that once you are there in the area, then you can start to look at Airbnbs in the local area and go and see them. Now, we did this, was it a couple of days ago? I can't remember. And there was 2. We had a short list, maybe Leanne found about 10. Leanne's amazing at finding Airbnb stuff. I look and I never find anything. Leanne always finds the most amazing ones. And they were kind of around about £500 a week, were they?
Yeah,
so
about that.
About the same as this. Obviously, with Airbnb, there's fees as well, which can often push that up quite a lot. But so we whittled it down to 2 options, quite close to each other. And so we said, right, well, let's go and look at them. Now, Airbnb doesn't give you the exact location. However, most of them have got pictures of the outdoor bit, or you can look through the window and go, oh, there's a tennis court there, and it gives you the rough area. So we just drove and walked around until we found it. We're like, we found it. This is the apartment. First one we looked at, and was like, yeah, this is really nice. And then there was a little, path down to the beach that we went and had a look at. Beautiful, right on the beach, lovely, quiet area, nice cars.
Yet there's always things they don't tell you, and the pictures you have to really scrutinize. But what we didn't know, and what wasn't mentioned in the description about this apartment, was that it's kind of a basement apartment, like it's half below street level. But does have a beautiful terrace, and the way it's positioned, it does get the sun for most of the day. So we were kind of like, yeah, we can live with that. But we wouldn't have known it was a basement apartment unless we would have seen it, or we would have rocked up and found out.
Absolutely. So then we went to look at the second option, which wasn't quite as nice an apartment, but still better location. And we turned up and we parked, and we could find out where it was. We parked, and they were literally building another apartment block next to it.
And by next to it, there must have been like 10 feet separating, like massive cranes and drilling
And even in there, like the 30 seconds it took to get out of the car and walk up to have a look, we heard 3 or 4 of the guys on the building site were throwing big buckets of, I'm guessing it's stuff that they've, I don't know, rubbish or whatever, but concrete from the top floor of the 5th floor up into a skip, which scared the crap out of all of us the first time it happened. We thought, well, that's just not going to be any good. And that we would never have known. We never would have known unless we got our boots on the ground.
Yeah, exactly. It's so important, and I think it's something that I'm not sure what it's like in other places, but in the UK, it's not renting. You go through an agent, or you go direct to the owner or online. You go see it, you sign a contract. You can use apps to understand like what the local rent typically is. Like, it's very transactional. Whereas our experience and where we've looked long term, which to be fair, has only been Spain and Croatia, but 2 very different countries. It has been more about the relationship, more about being on the ground. To really get a clear idea of what you can get for your money, what's fair, what area you want to be in. It's all down to that relationship.
And the final tip, I think, for me is, I think I said my last one was final, but this one's final, is that we were told that people ask for the rent they want, not necessarily the market rent. And so there's 2 parts to that. First of all, you might go and look at 2 apartments, both identical. One is on at €4,000 a month, one is on at €800 a month. What often impacts that is that if the apartment has been inherited, which is a lot happens in Croatia particularly, they don't tend to sell property, they tend to inherit it. Then if there's 3 children, then each of the children want like €800 a month from it. So therefore, the rent's going to be €2,400. Whereas if there's 1 child, it might be €800, same apartment. So there's that to consider. And also, there's no real sort of, if you're from the UK, right move. If you're from the US, begins with Z, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like a kind of a property comparison site. There's no real place to go and see how much rents are in an area. It's just how much they want to ask for. And some of them will ask for a lot of money. Like this guy went to see, he wanted 50,000, and he might be happy to have it empty, waiting for someone to come along and pay him $8,000 for the month, and he's happy with that. Whereas in the UK, it's very much like, oh no, it's a business, we've got to rent it out, otherwise, I don't want to be shuttered and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing as well, and which was great about being on the ground and talking to people and talking to other expats as well who are there long term, because they're going to know some bits and pieces. And one thing that we learned from some friends in Istria was that there's this funny rule in Croatia, and I'm not sure if it's the same elsewhere. I say funny as in odd, from kind of UK, it doesn't happen, is that they can't rent a property for any more money than it's advertised at. So if, for example, they have it on one website at €2,000 a month and another website at €1,000 a month, and as a potential tenant, I see both adverts, I can fairly legally insist that I will pay €1,000 because that's the lowest price that's been advertised. So they're always going to pitch it high, because of course they are, because they can't, if they end up getting in some kind of bidding war, they can't put the price up. So they have to start high on the off chance they get lots of interest.
I think the house we were in Istria was, I'm sure it was on for like €2,300 or something like that. It was a lot of money. And I remember saying to Leanne, let's go look at it. She says, why? Because that's just ridiculous. We can't justify that kind of rent. And we got there and we got it for quite significantly less than that. But again, as Leanne said, it wasn't that we went in there and went, well, I'll tell you what, we'll give you X amount of money for it. It was, we sat down with him. We didn't even talk money. Then we went round for dinner with him. Didn't talk money. Well, in fact, no, I think we might have said, yes, we want it. And he's like, okay, great. Let's just have dessert. And then we met him a third time. We started talking about money. And we went in and said, look, we're paying this at the moment. And we came to an agreement, but not to be put off. So if you're looking through, if someone wants 3,000 for it, it's worth going to look at it, even if your budget's only 1,000, because one, You might agree to meet somewhere in the middle, and which you might be able to afford. And two, even if they say no to this one, they might have others or know other people who've got something more in your budget.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. People always know somebody, who got something that, yeah. And I think just having that patience, and that's something that I'm not very good at. And Al's very good at it because he's done the whole negotiation with property stuff before. So he's like, yeah, it's cool, it's fine. I'm not very patient. But I've learned that you just have to be patient. You have to go through that process. And ultimately, it's better because you end up finding more out about your landlord, which is great. You know who you're giving all of this money to, if you can trust them, what the terms are. Yeah, patience.
Absolutely. So, what else have you got?
Nothing. I think I've covered mine.
Okay. So, I'll summarize all these in the show notes. If you listen to this, this was a lot of this was just scribbled notes before we started this, so I'll proper summarize them in the show notes. But essentially, what we're talking about is getting boots on the ground. Don't sign anything for a long term unless you've seen it and you've seen the area. Ideally, live in the area for a little bit. If you can. Consider that the Airbnb prices generally what they want a week is what you'll rent it long term for a month. Excuse me. Then also be aware that in July and August, the peak months, they might want you to move out or the rent might go up massively. Finally, just build the relationships. Ask everyone when you get here. Just ask everyone. You're in the shop. If someone starts chatting to you and you go, hey, can I ask a quick question? Where do you think is a good place to live? We have a dog, so it's lucky we go into dog park and then we'll ask people there and we find recommendations for vets, etc., etc., etc. But we just ask locally. And also just be aware that on some of the sites, people are people. And if you say, I'm thinking of moving to this particular area, which is a nice area, people might go, oh, it's nice, but it's really expensive there and whatever. And, oh, it's full of this. And there may be an element of jealousy there that online in certain groups.
Yeah, pinch of salt, like we said, different people, ask lots of different people. And once you tend to get a consensus from various people, then yeah, you can start to make an informed decision about it. I think the only last thing really is if you are looking at a long-term let, it's just really just being clear on what's included when they say plus bills. We've never really been caught or stung with this, but I guess it's just understanding just asking kind of generally what things cost, so water, electric, gas, internet, and then there's odd ones like Croatia has one, like you pay your bins centrally for them to come and take your bins. But that was in Austria, might not be in Split, I'm not sure. Spain had things like, I think we said that our first apartment had a shared pool, so there's some kind of community maintenance fee that we had to contribute to, or we negotiated that we wouldn't. Your man who's dreaming and wants 50k for a shitty apartment, actually it's not, it's nice, but it's just, it's no. He was like, oh yeah, plus bills, which is like, gas, electric, hot tub. Yeah, no, it's cleaned once a month, which is 300 quid. What? What do they do to it? You could buy a new hot tub every 6 months rather than just not clean it.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, a really good point. And there's other things which, like, we had a hot tub or a jacuzzi in, I don't know what the difference is. It's just a different name. Anyway.
I think jacuzzi might be a brand.
Ah, okay, like Tannoy and Hoover.
Yes.
But the other thing is, yeah, we had a hot tub in the last place, which did contribute to the electric. And then air conditioning is quite expensive, that kind of thing. So yes, be clear on the bills. And that's where it's as much the meeting and the dance you do at first is to see whether you can trust them as much as they see if they can trust you. Because in our last place, he just sent us a piece of paper with numbers on it and going, the total you owe for bills is this. Now, I think we could have asked for the bills and gone through them, but we wouldn't have known, we wouldn't have necessarily understood it. So we took it on trust.
Yeah, and then when we asked people kind of typically what do you pay, they kind of confirmed it was around that, didn't they? And I think it's just understanding, like the internet, for example, typically it's the same everywhere. I think you get different packages, so is that enough for what your needs are, blah blah blah. It's getting into the nitty-gritty specifics of it, but the better relationship you have, the more you're going to be able to have these conversations and feel confident in the answers that you're getting.
And if you're coming from the UK or the US, then the tenancy law is, and probably I'm guessing the same in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, etc., etc. Tenants tend to have a lot of power, whereas in some of the other countries they're not necessarily. We went to pay our rent on the dream house we talked about, where you was right by the sea. Went to pay our rent because we used to pay it cash every month in the estate agent's office. I will leave you to come to your own conclusion about why it was in cash. Went to pay on the estate agent's office, and she sat us down. She said, "I'm really sorry, I got some bad news. He's selling the house." And I was like, "Oh, right. How long we got?" He said, "Well, Tuesday. It's being sold on Tuesday." And we were like, "Shit, what do we do?" And she said, "Well, basically, just stay there because, he's going to have to work to get you out. And I'll just tell him that."
But it was a similar thing when she was like, until you're 2 months in arrears, he can't do anything. So you've got at least 2 months and then probably 3. And at that point, handed us back our rent. It's like, come in next week and I'll give you your full deposit. All right, then.
Now, we are landlords ourselves, and of course,
Horrifying that could happen.
Horrified it would happen. And also, we're not saying that try and screw your landlord. We're just saying that he screwed us by selling the house without even telling us.
And screwed her because he didn't sell it through her.
Yes. So, yeah. Anyway, so I think, is there anything else that we need to give around the actual where?
No, I think this is kind of all about, once you've settled on it, a city or a town is kind of narrowing that where to, where in that place. So I think they're the main things. Knowledge is everything. Being on the ground is everything. Take things with a pinch of salt until you get multiple people telling you the same thing. And if you ever have a problem with a Nikita, give me a call.
We should pull it off our dog. She's amazing. Right. Okay, guys. As ever, well, not as ever, as of last week, we have a new roadmap up on our site, sidewayslife.com/roadmap. Totally free. What you're going to get there, you'll see the roadmap we've created. It's a little bit rudimentary because we're looking for some feedback. If you just want to get involved in some way, if you think, yeah, cool, okay, help us, then we're not charging any money for it. Just there's a little pop-up. You can pop your email address in, and we'll get in touch with you. We'll reply back and go, hey, where are you up to? At this point, we just want feedback on it. We want to go, right, okay, what resonates, what doesn't, etc., etc. So if you're interested in getting involved, then do that. If you've got comments, thoughts, just want a shout out.
Keep them to yourself.
No, don't keep them to yourself. Well, if they're nasty, like what my mother used to say, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. But if you can say something nice and you want to tell Leanne how she's amazing and like She-Ra of the Akita world, that's a dated reference, isn't it? Then go to A Sideways Life on Instagram. That's instagram.com/sidewayslife, or just search for A Sideways Life, or email us at sidewayslife@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Bye for now.
Bye.